Welcome to California Edition. My name is Brad Pomerance. Over this episode, we will be speaking with three elected officials in the city of Long Beach. We will start with Doug Haubert. He's the elected city prosecutor. Then we'll be speaking with one of his colleagues. Her name is Doud. She is the elected city auditor. And then we are joined by James Johnson, a member of the city council in the beautiful city of Long Beach. But we start with the city prosecutor. Sir, thank you for joining us.
Thank you for having me, Brad.
Absolutely. I want to speak with you about a scheme that we know as realignment. As you know, the U.S. Supreme Court last year ruled that California state prisons were unconstitutionally overcrowded and that the state had to release prisoners to get in line with the Eighth Amendment, cruel and unusual punishment. Talk to us about how that has impacted prisons and jails in our state.
Well, the largest change in criminal justice in my lifetime has been realignment. I mean, this is changing the way we handle criminal justice here in California. We're the first state to do this. But felons, the majority of felons are no longer going to state prison. When they're convicted of a felony, as long as it meets certain criteria, and over 500 felony statutes have been amended to meet this criteria, they are not sent to state prison, they're sent to county jail.
Under the scheme, what you see is it's known as a three nons: non-sexual, non-violent, non-serious.
Correct.
And those individuals who are convicted of those felonies don't go to state jail. They don't go to state prison, they go to county jail.
They're going to go to county jail instead. And in some counties, it's not that big of a problem. Some counties have capacity. Los Angeles County does not have capacity and hasn't had capacity.
And a lot of counties actually in the Southern California region I know have been impacted negatively, one could argue. Riverside, San Bernardino. So talk to me as the city prosecutor of a major city in LA County, Long Beach. I think it's the second largest city in our county.
Yes.
How is that impacting your ability to prosecute criminal defendants?
Well, it's a dramatic impact because what do you do with those state felons that are sent to the county jail?
Right.
Well, they're going to displace people who are already in county jail. In Los Angeles County alone, since realignment started October 1 of last year, over 5,000 felons have been shifted from the state prison system to the county jail system. Well, that's 5,000 bodies that the county was not prepared to absorb, so they're going to have to release and continue to release, early release, people who are convicted of misdemeanor crimes, some of which are quality of life crimes, some of them are pretty serious.
Now, the argument goes that one of the side intended consequences or benefits of realignment is that for these less serious offenders, they will be serving their time closer to home, so they will have more community ties. Presumably, and I believe that there's supposed to be funding for programs to help integrate these individuals back into society. The program is less than a year old, so I don't know what the result is, but what do you make of that hope that, yes, we are sending these people to county jail, but they're closer to home, community ties?
Well, that's certainly a view. I think it's a very optimistic view, and I hope that that eventually happens. It's not happening yet. So far, all that's happening is that your early release this program has resulted in early release of people onto the streets who committed crimes. If there's no incarceration as a deterrent, people quickly learn nothing's going to happen to them if they commit crimes.
It's also interesting, and it's a little complicated, so as you know, I am a lawyer, used to be a lawyer. I'll try to simplify it if I can. So probation was, well, you explain what probation is, then I'll explain what parole is.
Well, in a misdemeanor case, almost every single case involves probation. The person is released really to their own custody.
Right.
There's no probation officer, there's no oversight, there's no supervision whatsoever.
And so what
parole is heavily supervised.
So let me try it. So what parole is after you serve a portion of your sentence,
of your felony sentence in state prison,
you can be released,
yes,
but you are under supervision.
Under supervision from a parole officer who can conduct drug tests on the person, require the person to check in with them, do unannounced checks of their person and their home, basically to check up on the person to make sure they haven't gone back to a life of crime. And that supervision, I think, saves a lot of money down the road because you're stopping you're preventing the behavior as soon as they get released from the state prison doors.
And as we speak today, for those individuals convicted of crimes that send them to state prison, there still is parole.
For people that go to state prison and are released, there is an opportunity for parole. That will stop July 1 of next year.
2013.
There will be no more parole July 1, 2013.
That's under the law that was passed pursuant to realignment.
Under realignment. So they'll be released. They'll be released early from either their state prison term or from the county jail. There just won't be any supervision for
if they're granted parole for whatever reason.
Correct.
But what's interesting is for those that are currently serving their sentences in county jail, there is no parole scheme.
There is no parole scheme. Today, there is no supervision for them. So these are felons who are going to county jail instead of state prison. They're released, but there is no active supervision of those people. That's why you see a lot of the police agencies increasing the number of sweeps they're doing, a lot of their door knocks. The police departments are taking the burden of actually going out and looking for these people to see if they're complying with the law.
There's been some controversy about some of these sweeps, we'll call them. I know that Supervisor Mark Ridley Thomas happened to have been present during one of these sweeps, and he found that particular sweep somewhat troubling.
Well, here's the difference. When you have a parole officer who knows the person who's on parole, it's an informal discussion. They call the person, they say, come in, we're going to drug test you. That doesn't exist anymore, so now you have a police unit, if you will, who doesn't know that person personally, who doesn't really have a rapport with that person. They may have 100 people on their list to check in the course of the week, and they're not going to take any chances. They're going to come in with their guns, they're going to come in with large numbers of people, and that's very disruptive to the lives of the people who are in the community.
Here's what's frustrating for so many. If we look at the state of California, it had been 20, 25, 30 years ago, we spent more on education than we did on prisons, incarceration, criminal justice. That is now flipped. We are spending more on criminal justice than we are on education. Part of that is voters continue to vote for longer sentences. 3 strikes. Politicians like to be strong on crime. Whether that's a good thing or a bad thing, I don't know. I'm not commenting. I'm a neutral journalist. But there are consequences to that. And the consequences are the U.S. Supreme Court saying you are running prisons in an unconstitutional fashion. You have a federal court overseeing the entire healthcare system of the state of California for criminal justice. And now we're spending, I think, $8 billion on a new hospital.
Yeah, and I think a lot of Californians would not be as upset about realignment as they are if money had been shifted, say, from public safety to education, but that hasn't happened. Public safety's just been cut. So I wish that there was an effort to actually increase.
Has public safety been cut? I mean, has it been cut any worse than any other line item in the during the recession?
Realignment is expected to save the state $1.5 billion over the next 4 years.
Right.
That is a savings the state wants to realize in the public safety sector. Now, they're not taking any savings and actually moving it towards rehabilitation and education.
Well, the counties are getting money for realignment, and part of that money, as I understand it, is supposed to go.
I think it is supposed to go there.
Right.
Yes.
But is it?
Well, I haven't seen it. Here in Long Beach, all we've seen is early release. We've seen the increase in early release. We're seeing 30-day sentences resulting in a release in 2 or 3 days.
But what's the answer? I mean, there's such a frustration, sir. You know, we want the bad guys to go away, but we also want to be able to send our kids to a UC or CSU or community college at a fee that's affordable.
Yeah. Well, there has to be a balance, and right now you see the pendulum shifting from maybe from one extreme all the way to the other extreme. Right. Instead of having a balance where there's a deterrence, where there's a true deterrence, if you commit a crime, there will be some punishment, there will be jail time. That should exist, but there should also be the rehabilitative services that people need to get their lives back on track. And education is a big part of that. I truly believe the dollars you spend early on in the lives of children will help save dollars down the line.
You told me something recently about truancy in 5th grade.
Well, there are many ways you can predict and look at at-risk youths and at-risk profiles and basically determine down the road that they're going to be dropouts from school. Dropouts do tend statistically to commit more crime and more likely to be incarcerated. In California, 75% of the people in state prison are school dropouts. And they had been truants in 5th grade. Yeah, and that's the #1 predictor of school dropout is truancy. So when they start missing school in 4th, 5th, 6th, 7th grade, they're not going to finish high school. If they don't finish high school, they're statistically in a group that will not succeed. They'll be in jail and they'll be unemployed. Doug Haubert, we thank you for joining us. He is the city prosecutor for the city of Long Beach. When we come back, we'll be speaking with Laura Doud. She is the elected city auditor for the city of Long Beach. I'm Brad Pomerance. We'll be right back on California Edition.
Which state houses the most prisoners per capita? California, Louisiana, New York, or Texas? According to the Times-Picayune, Louisiana houses the most prisoners per capita in the nation.
Welcome back to California Edition. I'm Brad Pomerance. Our guest is Laura Doud. She is the city auditor for the city of Long Beach. She is an elected official. Is it one of 4 in the state?
Yes, that's right.
So I think Los Angeles has an elected controller, which is like an auditor. What other cities? I can't remember.
City of Berkeley, City of Oakland, and City of Long Beach.
That's it.
So yes.
So explain to me exactly what the independent elected city auditor does for our viewers.
Well, thank you. Really,
Sure.
in a nutshell, it's really the checks and balance of taxpayers' money. Some refer to me as the watchdog of the city's taxpayer dollars. So it's really an honor to serve the citizens as the city auditor.
And what's interesting is the auditor was recently audited.
Yes.
Tell us about that.
Well, thank you. Thank you.
Yes.
Yes, we were. Before we went into any other departments to ensure that they're doing everything appropriately, we opened ourselves up to an audit that is required by the industry.
How was that for you?
Yes, I know. Well, it gave us a good perspective on how other people feel, but just the importance of abiding by the rules. And I'm just very happy to report that we came through, met the highest standards, and we're in full compliance with what the industry requires. And I think that really shows the public that our office is fair, reliable, credible, that our work is unbiased, and we just want to deliver the facts to the community.
How large is your staff?
I have a staff of 17 people.
Okay, so it's a nice size,
Yes.
and I presume that many of them are accountants, professionals
Yes,
that know how to
right.
get into the forensics of the books and figure
Right.
out what's happening.
Right, yes, exactly.
Now, yeah, please.
No, I just wanted to say that
Yeah.
sometimes auditing isn't the most exciting thing to talk about.
But it can be.
And that's right, it can be, and it is.
detective work.
That's right, and I love it. But sometimes when you bring it up, you can see people's eyes glaze over and so forth, and they might not care about proper compliance or internal controls, but when money goes missing or when the taxpayers' dollars are at risk, it really does matter.
But here's the thing, Laura. I mean, when we talk about protecting taxpayer dollars, when we talk about keeping those dollars precious, who else but the auditor, but the controller, I don't want to say uncover, because it's not always sinister, but you can go in and really just help with best practices. It doesn't have to be wrongdoing per se.
No, right, exactly. That's right, to make sure that the money is being spent as intended and that it is being spent responsibly and as efficiently as possible.
And as you know, I'm sure the state of California is going through a mini scandal when recently the Department of Parks just somehow uncovered $54 million.
Right.
You know,
right.
How does that happen?
Right, in special funds.
In special funds.
Right.
And so, again, was there something sinister? Well, it doesn't seem that way since it wasn't embezzled per se.
Right.
But there's this money just sitting around.
That's right. And so as the watchdog, it is our responsibility to make sure that we are alert, we are aware, we're looking, we're aggressive, we're on it to make sure it is being spent appropriately.
So I think I mentioned to you, I used to work at a television studio. And there was a case whereby an individual set up a dummy account, a dummy television station, and was able to embezzle, this is many years ago, over $1 million. Just so disheartening on so many levels, in addition to the loss of $1 million. It's that one of your coworkers is involved in such a sinister scheme. Sadly, we understand that there is a serious allegation that has been made against now a former worker of animal care services in Long Beach. I mean, animals of all departments, animals.
Right.
And the way it was uncovered, I believe, was in large part through the auditor's office.
Yes, we did receive a fraud hotline call that this was uncovered, that there was allegations and suspicions of somebody stealing cash. So we did go in to investigate, and basically it was a lack of checks and balances.
It was that simple.
It was really that simple. One, the money that was being deposited was significantly less than that was what was recorded. One person had access to control basically all the cash. One person had the ability to make and prepare and deposit the money, as well as do the complete reconciliation without supervisory review.
And what's on the record, so this is public knowledge, what this individual allegedly had been doing was she would deposit checks and pocket the cash. And if you think about, when you pay for, let's say, an animal license, 18 bucks, I'm just throwing that out.
Right.
Yeah, now it's 20.
Yeah, right, exactly. No, it's largely a cash-based business.
And so the allegation is over, I think it was 11 months, she embezzled
over $250,000.
That's over 11 months, and this is an employee who worked at the department for 20 years. So one can only imagine the amount of money she may have embezzled the prior 19. The good news is, I mean, let's look at the silver lining. Part of the reason why you were able to uncover the last 11 months, let's say, is because of a new system.
That's right.
Explain the new system.
Yes, right. Well, the system allowed the employees to document whether cash or check was received.
Right.
It was recorded. It couldn't be overridden by anyone. The controls were in place on the system to ensure that that this money was being properly monitored and tracked. In the past, when it was done manually,
you know,
in
manually
this day and
in
age,
the 21st century,
right? Exactly.
Laura,
I know.
Madam Auditor.
It's, I know. It's a shame. It's very troubling.
Right.
To know that someone could just, crumple up a piece of paper
Long Beach.
and
we're not
go-
talking
right.
some small tiny
No,
city.
I know. It's significant, and we need to get into the 21st century throughout the city. But thank goodness that the system was in place at least, and it's late, but it was, and we were able to document
See,
substantially.
here's what's frustrating for so many is that we want to move into the 21st century, but it costs money to move into the 21st century.
Right.
And so we don't have the capital to move into the 21st century.
But what we're saying is it's worth the investment.
Right.
We have to. We really do.
Are you being heard?
I think so. There was another audit we talked about where there was $18 million of uncollected parking
Right,
tickets.
we've talked about that, yes.
And it was because of a bad system. So we were able to convince the mayor and council to approve a $1 million purchase of a new system to collect this revenue that's outstanding.
I want to talk about your fraud hotline
Thank
because
you.
in the instance of the animal services supervisor, it was as a result of a call to the hotline. Explain how that hotline works.
Great.
And tell us about the protections because so often
Yes.
whistleblowers are afraid.
Yes, that's right. Thank you. It is difficult for people to come forward. They are unsure and they feel that there might be retribution. So we're very sensitive to that. But it is a fraud hotline call that their identity is protected. You can
Say
call
that again.
Their identity will be protected. There
That's
is
a city law.
Whistleblower protection, and it's actually state law now.
It's a state law, even
It's
better.
new. Right. Yes, and they can call 24/7. There's a third party that will take the call. They can report their information without, being disclosed, and we will follow up on it.
And you did.
And we did.
You
And
did.
we will. Right, exactly. But we depend on them to call us. They see
There's
it
no other
firsthand. They're
way.
right there.
Right. How else can, I mean, there's almost 1,000 employees in Long Beach. How are you, I mean, you can't cover them all.
We can't.
You also, Madam Auditor, are looking to develop a more comprehensive fraud protection or prevention and reporting policy. Tell us about that.
Thank you. Yes, right now there is no policy citywide on fraud prevention and reporting. So we just
How?
right.
How is there
I
no-
know. So we just want to make it very clear for the employees, the managers, city management to know there is a process in place. Employees, you have a duty to come to your supervisor, city management, and or the city auditor to report your suspicions, your knowledge of anything, of wrongdoing, abuse, waste, fraud, whatever it is, we need to cut it out. And even though it's difficult to talk about, we can't ignore it. We really need to take it head on.
I want to talk not so much about fraud. That's obvious.
Yeah.
Abuse, also obvious. It's the waste, because that is the trickier one. We hear so often from elected officials, there's too much waste, there's too much bureaucracy, there's too much duplication. How do you get a hold of that? I mean, that's so, it's amorphous.
Right, it is. And we're in the thick of things right now with the budget.
Right, oh yes
And
we are.
we are looking at every possible way to streamline government and being smart about the way we're using our money, because
Right.
in this times of reduced government funding. You mentioned duplication. I think we really need to look at the city as a whole to eliminate duplication right off the bat. But there's little things with waste that we just need to tighten up and make sure we're spending the money as if it's our own.
So, I mean, can someone call the hotline to talk about waste?
Yes, of course.
Because
yes.
again, it's not
Yeah.
sinister, presumably.
No, that's right. But we need their eyes and ears out in the community
Right.
to report any city waste, abuse, or fraud.
Laura Doud, thank you so much for
thank
joining us.
you.
We appreciate it. Her name is Laura Doud. She is the auditor of the City of Long Beach. When we come back, we'll be speaking with James Johnson. He is a member of the Long Beach City Council. Surely we'll be hearing about Laura Dowd's new anti-fraud policy. I'm Brad Pomerance. We'll be right back on Charter California Edition.
Who currently serves as the California State Auditor? John Chung, Elaine Howell, Bill Lockyer, or Betty Yee? Appointed in 2000, Elaine Howell serves as the auditor for the state of California.
Welcome back to California Edition. Our guest now, James Johnson, member of the Long Beach City Council. And sir, I want to speak with you about an issue on the minds of many municipally elected officials, and that is bankruptcy. We know that 3 cities, as we speak, have filed for bankruptcy: San Bernardino and Stockton, as a result of fiscal woes. Mammoth Lake's another issue. They had a judgment levied against them. I want to focus on San Bernardino for a moment, because the mayor of San Bernardino said on the record that one of the reasons his city faced bankruptcy was the loss of redevelopment. Could you talk to me about your view of that and how it may play into Long Beach, who, as I understand it, is not at risk of bankruptcy?
That's right. Well, and the reason is we've been taking prudent financial decisions, or making those prudent decisions, for years.
Right.
And they're tough decisions. You have to cut back, but in an era of less, you've got to spend less. Some cities, I think, were basically leaning on redevelopment as a crutch. Now the crutch is here, they're falling down.
Right.
Long Beach never did that. We used that for extra things that we needed, and it's tough to be without it, but we still have those core programs like police and fire that will be largely unaffected by redevelopment.
So let's talk about your attempts at economic development, and then we'll get back more to the issue of bankruptcies. I know that you have been working diligently to create economic development opportunities not only in your district, but throughout Long Beach and really the greater Southern California area.
Well, that's right. And I think the question is, with a loss of redevelopment, how do you do economic development in cities nowadays?
How? Tell me.
Yeah.
I don't know how.
Well, I think the first thing is you strive to have a business-friendly atmosphere in your city, to say businesses, particularly local businesses, we're open for business. We want to welcome you to do everything that you want to do. Second, I think you say to your residents that, you know what, these businesses are providing core services that you may need. And finally, you know, when you talk about businesses, these are businesses providing that tax base. They're going to provide the revenues to do all the things you want to do, whether it's build new parks, provide public safety, or what have you, even improve your sidewalks. So those are important elements.
Another issue that I think is critical for a business is they want to know that the community in which they enter is safe. We know that in Long Beach, for example, 68% of this year's city budget was dedicated to police and fire. San Bernardino's mayor said on the record that another reason for its demise was the incredible cost, and this is his words, I don't know if, you know, whether it's legitimate or not, but the incredible cost that the city had to pay for employee compensation, including pensions. The city of Long Beach has recently announced it will engage in layoffs, including police officers, although I guess it's through attrition, but still, there will be less police officers.
Well, we're doing everything we can to avoid layoffs, because with layoffs, you lose that investment in that individual. But that said, if we don't solve the pension problem, you're going to have less employees, which is worse for not just the employees, but also worse for our residents. That's why it's so important we look at alternative ways of providing safety, such as things like lighting. You know, well-lit streets are safer streets, and that's why we've applied for, you know, hundreds of new lights throughout Long Beach to lighten up the streets and provide public safety in a way that's cheaper over the long run.
Now, as it relates to pensions in Long Beach, I know that in the past year, there were some pension negotiations between your safety unions, and there are savings that will be seen in fiscal year 2013, maybe $6 million. But I understand that you still have some bargaining units that aren't coming to the table. I think it's the machinists, for example.
That's right. So our largest employee union, we have not been able to reach an agreement yet. But really what the city is saying is we want to be fair to employees, but also fair to taxpayers and residents. And we cannot have these costs escalate year after year, because if we do, we're going to be cutting not just this year and next year, but for decades to come. We need to preserve services. So what we've said is let's have a pension system that's fair but sustainable. And you know, we're not just talking the talk, we're walking the walk. We've been able to do that with both police and fire already.
Now, if you look at San Bernardino, right down the road from here, not that far actually, one of the reasons why they have suffered so dramatically over the last 15, 20 years is the Norton Air Force Base was closed. They really could never recover from that. In Long Beach, you had a major employer literally disappear, the Navy, and yet Long Beach hasn't faced the same demise as San Bernardino. What has gone right? Is it that you've rejiggered the ports? How have you been able to bounce back?
Well, that's a good point, Brad. You know, I think the one constant in life is change. And yes, Long Beach had to change. We lost in the Navy, we lost the base, the shipyard, the housing. So we had to change. And we could have said, oh, we're going to look at the old days, but we said, no, we're going to look to the future. So So yes, we grew goods movement and got a lot of trade from there. We also emphasized tourism. We also looked at our local economy and said, what about serving your own residents? What are we going to do to provide services here so that residents aren't going to South Coast Plaza or to Torrance or Cerritos to shop, but they're shopping right here at home, keeping those tax dollars at home. That's important, not just because you're providing a service, but because you're keeping those tax dollars here that provide services for all our residents.
But you mentioned city services, and when we look at the upcoming budget, 2013 fiscal year, the cuts are pretty dramatic. We see that library services will be cut over $1 million. We see the Department of Recs and Park will be cut by almost $3 million. I mean, these are significant cuts that really changes the face of how a city operates.
That's right. Well, Brad, when you have a $1.2 billion pension, unfunded pension liability, bad things happen. And the reality is we have about the same amount of money we had last year. So the question is, if we have about the same amount of revenues, why are we cutting? Well, we're cutting because our costs are spiraling out of control. That's why we've got to contain the costs in a way that's fair to our employees, but also fair to our residents who cannot see indefinite cuts in all these services.
I recently spoke with one of your colleagues, Jerry Shipsky, and what her lament is that Long Beach actually has had surpluses at the end of each fiscal year, in her mind, as a result of oil revenues. And her view is that why are we spending these one-time surpluses? Why don't we roll it into the next fiscal year to avoid the cuts that we have to make each fiscal year?
Yeah, well, that's a good question, and the answer is you don't spend one-time money on ongoing expenses. So, Brad, if you find, let's say you find a $100 bill on the ground, you can't use that to hire someone for $100 a week for the next 2 years in salary because you only have one $100 bill. So the answer is when you have one-time monies, it's important to use it on things like streets or sidewalks that are one-time expenses. You can't use it to spend on a salary because when their salary is going to continue, that cost will continue, you're not going to have the money in the future.
But her view is that it's not one-time money, that there have been surpluses at the end of the last few years because of oil revenues, in large part because we have seen the price of oil spike and it's staying pretty high.
Well, just a few years ago, oil went down to $25 a barrel, and that was 2008, I believe. And what happened that year was the city budgeted a very high price, and then during the middle of the year, we had to do dramatic reductions in police fire services because we were too aggressive. So we are being realistic, we are increasing the price of oil, but it's important that we're prudent, that we don't hope that good times are always going to be here and then say, what do we do during the middle of the year? So I think it's important that we have prudent reserves, that we think about how we're going to have oil revenues that are sustainable, because it's not fair to employees to peg their salaries to a revenue source that may or may not be there.
But the problem with that is that under the proposed budget, the employee workforce is slated to drop by 294 positions. Those are 294 individuals. Those are people that need to pay the mortgage. And so what do you say to those people when you do have these surpluses running?
Well, first of all, we don't have surpluses running, just to be clear. So what we do have is in certain years we have one-time monies available for one-time uses. We actually have deficits, so that's just to be clear on that. But what I say to those people is, first of all, there are not 290 people that are going to be laid off. You have positions that are going to be eliminated.
Unfilled.
We'll have much fewer potential layoffs. So what I'm saying is we've got to reorganize our city to protect you guys for the future. If we let costs continue to increase, then we know what's going to happen. So we're going to cut not this year, but for the next 20 years in a row.
So do you think that the machinists will come to the table? I mean, look, in San Diego and San Jose, there was a pension reform initiative on the ballot. They passed by huge margins. Yeah. That's what could happen.
Well, we're going to continue to negotiate in good faith, and I can't predict what will happen, but I will tell you that this council member, and I believe my colleagues, are firm in saying we're going to do the right thing for our residents. We definitely prefer to have a negotiated solution, so that's what we're going to focus on and see what we can do moving forward.
His name is James Johnson. He is a member of the Long Beach City Council. My name is Brad Pomerance. Thank you so much for watching Charter California Edition.